rising sophomore at Brown University. I'm studying economics and computer science. And basically what this event is kind of going to be formatted like is I'll just share a little bit about my high school experience, my admissions experience, and then sort of reflecting on my first year in college. I got the list of questions that Sherry sent me, and I'll just sort of be running through those questions. I think that as I'm answering the questions, you'll hopefully get a sense of who I am, what are some of the things I've done, and then at the end, if we have some extra time, I think we can also take some questions from the crowd. How I sort of formatted it is I saw that there were a lot of questions regarding three main categories. The first is like high school, just like what did I do in high school, activities, classes, things like that. Then applications, so like what did I find helpful when I was applying to college, and then questions about college. So I'll sort of be going through high school, applications, college. Yeah, so I think I can just sort of start now. The first question I got was, how should a student plan out his high school years? So I think I'll be speaking from my experience with all these questions. So like with everything I say, it may have worked well for me, but just like understand that like for your child or for you, then maybe your path might be a little different. So for how a student should plan out his or her high school years, I think there are really two main components to this question, right? You first have an academic piece, and then you have a more like extracurricular outside of class piece. Academically speaking, I know that my freshman year and my sophomore year, oh, by the way, I went to Palo Alto High School. So during my freshman and sophomore year, a lot of the classes were already set for me. There were a lot of requirements, general education things that you don't really get to pick and choose. I think the more, like the older you get, junior, senior year, that's when you start having more choices regarding what classes you want to take, APs, right, advanced courses, and that's when you sort of can branch out and decide how to balance your schedule. I think it's like not super difficult. You just have to, especially if you want to take a bunch of APs, sort of figure out which ones you're looking to take, and then maybe get a list of your school's requirements, make sure that you can fulfill all those requirements, and then also fit in those APs. So it just takes a couple, like a little bit of time thinking beforehand to make sure you can fit everything. But I think it's pretty straightforward when planning like your schedule. And then I think extracurricular-wise, something that I think what I did in high school was freshman year, I really tried to explore all the various activities, clubs offered on campus, really just to get a sense of what I enjoyed doing, what I didn't like doing. So example, freshman year I did a lot of things. I did swimming, I did science bowl, I did an art club, I did speech and debate. I also, I think, was very focused on math and science as my sort of academic focuses. And that was great freshman year because I really got, I think, to try a little bit of everything that I thought I'd be interested in, and it gave me a good sense of like what each of these things would be if I continued with it. And sophomore year, I think what I would advise is to start cutting down on the things you're doing, right? Because freshman year, you have more time. It's all about exploring. It's all about trying new things. But then as you get older, as you take harder classes, right, you have less time. And it's very hard to continue doing like everything, right? So sophomore year, I started cutting down on the things I was doing. For example, I stopped swimming. I didn't do science bowl anymore, and I really put more focus on humanities and sort of like history, English classes. I discovered that those were the classes that I was more inclined to naturally, even though like I wasn't bad at math or science per se, but compared to some of my peers, I just wasn't as passionate about it, and because of that, it was harder for me to do well in those classes, whereas for the other classes I really did enjoy taking, it was a lot easier for me to do better, and I had more fun doing it. So I think sophomore year, and then from there going junior, senior year, I really just started focusing on what I thought I was good at, what I enjoyed doing, really working on those classes and those activities, to make sure I could do those to the best of my ability, not trying to do everything at once. So I think generally it'd be, as you start high school, take the time to explore, figure out what you enjoy, and then as you get older or go through high school, try to cut down a bit and focus in on a couple things that you really want to develop. Okay, next questions I got were any suggestions on more efficient time management / any training seminars that I thought were helpful. So I think for me, I've been fortunate. I think I've always been like fairly good at time management. One thing that I think was really helpful for me is, at least at our high school, they gave every student a planner. It's basically like a book with a calendar in it, and I would go in, write down my homework, my activities, things like what I had to do after I got home from school. And I think that was really helpful for me because, again, like as you go through high school, you start getting more and more things to do, right? I think in middle school, I never needed a planner because I could just remember everything. But definitely as you have more stuff, it's harder to remember, and at certain points, it can become overwhelming and you can forget, right? So I think writing everything down, trying to plan it out, is also good for sort of developing maybe like week-long, month-long goals. Right now I'm using Google Calendar to plan out my days, which I also think is great. Yeah, and then sort of going off that piece, I got a couple questions about playing computer games, how to move away from playing video games / did I play computer games. So I think sort of it's important for like people in general to have a balance of work and relaxation, right? So like people need to be able to relax, whether that's playing video games, whether that's hanging out with your friends, whether that's like going to the movies. I personally also play a lot of games. I just think the important thing there is figuring out how to balance that with your workload, right? Because I don't think you can have only one or the other. For me, I think it was just sort of developing this understanding that in the event that I had like a test or a project that was due soon, and then I also wanted to play this game, hey, I should focus on my work first and then play afterwards. I also found that if you focus on one task at a time, I'll actually end up with more times to play my games after I finish my work versus if I do them both at the same time, right? So I think it's definitely a difficult balance to reach, and I'm still working on that too, but I think it definitely helps as you sort of mature and go through high school and then start college, you start developing that sense for yourself. And then that also ties back into like having a planner. So if you can plan out how much time you want to spend on your homework and then plan out how much time you want to spend like relaxing, that can help make you like have a mix of both. Next question was, do you have any leadership experience? What kind of community service did I participate in? Yeah, so I think for me, as I started to drift away from like the more math, science like path, I found myself enjoying a lot more interactive, sort of being involved in organizations and developing leadership experience there. So I think leadership was one of my strengths in high school. So a little bit about what I did in high school. Junior year, I was a class president, and then senior year, I was a student body president at my high school. I also was involved as a coach on our debate team. I was a writer for our like student publication, and I also worked with the city on a couple of community service projects. So I think definitely like outreach and leadership were like an area of strength for me. Someone asked me how many hours of service, I guess, per year. I think because that was so much of my focus, I like ended up getting a lot of hours. I think maybe around 200 per year, but I know that's like more than like a normal person has, just because that was sort of what I focused on. And generally when people ask me about community service hours, I like to tell them like, you shouldn't be looking for the hours, you should be looking for an activity, and usually the hours will come with the activity. So for example, when I did debate, I would coach middle school students, right? I didn't go in thinking, oh, I want to do debate because it'll give me community service hours. I was thinking I want to do debate because I enjoy debate, I enjoy teaching, right? And the community service hours were sort of a plus. And I think with a lot of clubs, organizations, community service hours are just like kind of easy to come by, so I wouldn't worry too much about like getting hours. I know for the President's Award, it's like 100 hours, which I think generally should be pretty manageable. Especially since like some activities you can work in the summer, and then those will also give you hours, so you can like load up in the summer while you don't have school to focus on. Next question was, during your student life, how important are those after schools and extracurricular activities? So I think for me, again, because that was so much of what I did and what I focused on, it was a big part of my high school experience, and I'd say I probably learned more and grew more as a person by participating in my extracurriculars than I did at school. I think it was a really great opportunity for me to figure out what I enjoyed doing, practice some more like practical, real-life, hands-on skills, and also learn how to interact with people better. and like plan events, reach out to the community, things like that. So I think like everyone should try to find at least one or two outside of school activities that they're really passionate about and want to pursue. Someone asked me, how do you prepare for after-school activities? I think it's kind of like a broad question because that changes depending on what activity you're doing, right? So if you're doing an academic activity, maybe it's a lot of studying, a lot of research. If you're doing more like leadership-oriented activity, it'd be more like planning, meeting with people, right? I think the bottom line though is if you want to be well prepared for an activity, you need to be like willing to invest the time and energy into that activity. I know that sounds very like obvious, right? If you want to do well, you need to put in time and effort, but I think it's oftentimes you get a lot of people who are joining an activity just because they want to join, right? Like some people will join science or debate just because they think it sounds good on their resume, they think it will help them with college applications. But I do think that what's more important than breadth of having activities is depth, right? So really trying to get involved, get leadership positions, and spend some time on each activity you do versus like doing a bunch of things for very little time. Someone asked me, how did you like Chinese learning? So I did Stanford Chinese School. It's at Gun High School. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. I took it up until AP, and I think for me in high school it was very much sort of like, I want to get through this, I want to finish Chinese, like I want to be done with Chinese school forever. But now, sort of like looking back on it, I kind of wish I had worked on my Chinese a little bit more. I think now I'm starting to see how useful it is, right? And that's something I'm working on, trying to improve my Chinese. So it's a growing like for Chinese learning. Okay, next question is, anything we should know regarding high school students taking college courses while in high school? So personally, I didn't take any, I didn't go to any college and take college courses. I know that some of my friends did, and again, I think that it can be helpful if you want to really like show that you are willing to put in the time to extend your knowledge on a certain topic. I know that it can also be helpful if you want to like take a couple AP classes. Some of them will let you skip introductory classes if you take college courses. So I think it can be helpful. I don't have a ton of experience with myself, but I know people have done it, so I'd say like if you're really interested in it, look into it a little bit, see how the college courses would work with your school's curriculum and their requirements, and then if it like fits, if it's a good, if it like seems like it'd be helpful, I think it'd be something good to look into. Next question was, what are 3 things I think is important to have/do in high school? So I'll actually talk. Yeah, question.
Regarding your previous question, I was wondering, like, so you know, like AP 10, right? You get 5 on the test, you can skip the first semester at Stanford. Would you recommend skipping, or would you just still take the intro course?
So like this is after once you're in college. So at least for Brown, they actually don't allow you to use any AP credits to skip courses. So I think it depends on like the college you go to, right? But I think that if you feel like you're confident enough in the material, skip it, because then you'll have more opportunity to take higher level courses and take, like, frankly, more interesting classes, right? But I do think that if you feel sort of uncertain about the topic, right, you should, I'd rather, at least from my experience, maybe be in an easier class, especially like first semester of college, and feel really like prepared for the next semester than going in like very shaky and sort of struggling early on. Like for me this semester, even though I took AP Economics in high school, because Brown doesn't let you like skip classes unless you have like both AP Economics courses, which I didn't. Even though I felt pretty good about economics, I still took Principles of Economics, and I think it was good because it sort of gave me, like, it strengthened my foundation. Even though I knew a lot of the material, there was definitely stuff I didn't know as well. So I think it kind of varies case by case, but I think if you can do it, you should try to do it. Yeah. Okay, yeah, so going back to the question earlier about summer, what are the important things to do and have in high school? So I was sort of thinking upon my high school experience, and I came up with 4 like sort of broad ideas that I thought were really helpful for me as I chose when I followed them. So the first is, don't be afraid to ask for help. I know that, and this like applies both to academics and also outside of class, right? I think sometimes people feel there's kind of like a stigma to ask for help, whether that's like you're struggling with classes, right? I think going to my teachers, asking them like, hey, I don't understand this, can you help me work through this after school? Or during, we had this time at Pali called like team or tutorial where basically the teachers are devoted to answering questions during that time. So I would take advantage of that time. Also like asking questions with stuff you're doing outside of school, right? So if you're running a club, if you're part of an organization and you want to get something done, don't be afraid to like email your mayor or your city council people, right? And say like, hey, I'm doing this cool thing, would you be interested in like providing some input? And I think it was actually very surprising for me like how many people are willing to like help you, right? There are a lot of resources out there, you just have to sort of ask, and like a lot of them will come. That sort of ties into my next like piece of advice is really don't be afraid of opportunities and jump on opportunities when you see them. I think for me, like one of the lessons I learned was like if there's something that you want to go for or you want to try, you should really just do it. There's not a lot to lose. For example, when I was in high school, I always wanted to run for student government, but the first 2 years I didn't want to because I was always afraid of what am I going to do if I'm going to lose, right? It's going to be so embarrassing. But then sophomore year going to junior year, I just realized that, you know, even if I do it and I lose, nothing is going to change, right? It'll just be the same. But if I win, like it could be a really cool experience. So that's why I decided to run, or that's part of what motivated me to run for student government, and it ended up going well, and I really think that it was one of the best experiences I had in high school. And that was sort of just on the whim, like, hey, should I do this? Okay, I guess I'm gonna do it, right? So I think a lot of times there are really cool opportunities, whether that's organizations, teams, classes, that if you're interested, I highly recommend at least just like trying it out, and if you don't like it, then not going, right? Because sometimes it's hard to determine what you might miss if you don't try. Other things were, okay, the last two are like advice-wise, try to work hard, right, and maintain good grades. I'll get into this a little bit later in my applications piece, but I think that it's really important, especially during high school, to do your best, right? I think to do your best and try to be as good of a student as possible is really something that a lot of students should aim to do, not only for like applications, but also just so that you can learn as much as possible. And then that's also sort of ties into my last piece of advice, is also don't forget to have fun though. I think sometimes, especially in Bay Area, right, like we're all Asian, there can be a lot of pressure to focus on academics and focus on success. And sometimes that piece of like having fun can be forgotten, but I think really making sure that you have a mix of both is just really healthy and can help. Like by having fun, you are more ready to work, and by working, you're more able to enjoy your relaxation, right? So I think looking for opportunities, asking for help, trying to maintain your grades, but also still making sure that you have some time to yourself to relax. Those are my important lessons that I took away from high school. Okay, does anyone have any questions regarding high school before I move on to applications? Okay, if you do later, feel free to raise your hand. Okay, so now I'll be sort of talking about my experience applying to college and answering these application-related questions. So the first question was, when did you start to prepare for college application? So I think most people tend to prepare their applications the summer of junior year going into senior year, and that process starts sort of in the summer and then will continue until you either like get into a school like early decision or until all the applications close, right? So it's usually summer of junior year to the like end of winter break senior year. And let's see, someone asked me, what is your general how to better prepare for college application, right? I think starting early is something that's very, very important. I probably started working on my applications like towards the second half of junior summer, but I would have appreciated if I had more time because like a lot of these schools, each one you apply to will ask you a different essay question, right? So that's another essay you have to write for every different school you're applying to, and that can build up to be a lot. And I think it also takes a lot of time to refine first of all, like come up with an idea and then refine your essays, refine how you're wording certain things in your application. And it's all just a very time-intensive process. So start as early as possible, I think, doing your research, writing your essays, getting feedback. And then another plus side of starting early is that by working on a lot of your applications early on and having them like kind of to a good point when you start your senior year is that you also have a lot less stress academically, so you won't have to juggle like both applications and senior year at the same time, right? What is your general strategy in choosing the right schools to apply to, how to set reach and safety colleges for application? So one of the tools that I found was really helpful that my high school provided, I don't know if all high schools do this, but we had a website called Naviance, which sort of showed the past admission records for our schools. So I could look up the classes before me, who got, not who got into what schools, but like how many students were admitted into each school, and then what their test scores were like and what their GPA was like, right? So then from there, I think I got a pretty accurate sense of like, hey, this is the range of schools that I should be looking at, and then like you can always see like, oh, this might be a little bit of a stretch for me. This might be like more of a safety school. So I think doing some research would be really helpful. If your school doesn't have that tool, looking at either like an admissions list from the year before, and if you know some of the students, try to like match up like, hey, I'm kind of similar to this guy, where did he go, right? And then also maybe like talking with people who are experts, like Sherry probably has a good idea, or like can help you estimate where a good range would be. You can also talk to your guidance counselors to get an idea of what schools you should be applying towards. Okay, next question was impact of GPA, and then without a perfect GPA, how did I get into like certain schools? So I think my GPA was 3.89, so a couple Bs, and at our high school we didn't have a weighted GPA at that time, so like if you took AP classes, they wouldn't give you extra boost. So I think like it wasn't a perfect GPA, but I still think it was like fairly solid. I think GPA is important in the application process because it tells the admissions officers a couple of things, right? It tells them how diligent a certain student is willing to work. Academically, how much of their courses are they understanding, right? And also, like, how do they compare relative to their peers, right? So I think, again, like this is going back to my piece earlier about trying to maintain good grades. I think that like you should do the best of your ability to try to get good grades, and that doesn't mean like getting an A in every class, but really just doing your best. Like for me, I tried my hardest in math, still got a B, right? But what was more important for me is that, hey, I put in this effort, and overall, I think like my GPA was still pretty solid. Let's see, how to prepare for college application, how to build a solid profile. So I think, yeah, one is starting early, and then two is getting a lot of eyes to sort of look at your application. I know a lot of times it can be scary to give your application, your essay to other people to look at, especially since sometimes your essays can be like very personal, right? But I found that it was really helpful when I like showed my essay to like my mom, to someone like Sherry, who had a lot of experience reading essays, and even like older friends who are already in college, asking them to take a look at my essays was really helpful, because I think, you know, you're writing your essay, you spend so much time reading it that you sort of become like used to it, right? You no longer have that instant impression of like, hey, what do I think of this student when I read this essay, or read this student's application? So I think asking for different people to read your essay and then give you feedback, and then sort of making tweaks based on the feedback you receive can be really helpful. I know it was for me. I also think other things that were helpful when I was applying for college was, I think starting junior year, I started writing down everything I did in high school. So like if I won an award, if I hosted an event, if I did something notable, I put it down on a Word doc, just so that I would remember when it came time for college applications, because a lot of the times you can forget that you did things, and when it comes time to like, they give you a bunch of boxes that you have to fill out, it was really nice to say like, oh, like I already have this list of things I've done that are pretty cool, just put them in this list. So keeping track of the things you're doing can be helpful. I also think it's important to really take the time to figure out how you're like phrasing and presenting yourself on your application, right? I think a lot of colleges are looking for a very holistic person, not just someone who's good at good at studying, and or someone who's just good at doing other stuff. They're looking for well-roundedness, right? So within your application, making sure that you do have some sort of focus, but you also show that you have multiple layers is important. And I think another big part of applications that can be overlooked but very helpful is the wording, right? For example, if I said I worked at a fast food restaurant, period, that is something that may not be as impressive as if I said hey, I managed a group of employees, I interacted with customers, I engaged with our managers, and I helped drive customers to our restaurant, right? So I think being smart about how you word things can also play an important part in your application. Other questions? What qualifications do you think colleges value? I think, as I was saying before, they want to see someone who is capable academically, someone who's very passionate about some sort of subject that then once they get to college, they will be able to share that passion with the other students and contribute. I think a lot of the times, at least I kind of felt this, it was if you want to get into good college, you have to be good at math. You have to be a physics, whatever, gold medalist or something like that. But as I've gone through college, I've realized that the schools are looking for a well-rounded population, right? They're not going to only accept people who are good at math. They want people who are good at multiple things. They want a nice spread of interests and topics. So I think what schools are looking for is really is they're looking for someone who can show they're passionate for a certain topic, and that they are willing to and able to give back to the community in some way. Cool. Any questions about applications? Yeah, start with you.
How did you approach the wide brown essay?
Sure. So I think one of the things that was really helpful for me when I did the Y Brown essay, or a Y any college, was if I knew a lot about the college, right? So I was fortunate enough to visit Brown, and I had a pretty good experience there. So I was able to draw upon my visit and talk about what I sort of felt the campus vibe was like, why I thought I fit in there. Also a little bit more in depth about Brown, right? We have the open curriculum, which is, for people who don't know, at Brown, we don't have any requirements for general education requirements. We only have major requirements, and I talked about why I thought that would be a good fit for me. And then I also mentioned sort of how my work in high school, I could see myself translating that to working at Brown. But yeah, I do think knowing a lot about the schools you're applying to can be very helpful, because I think for some of the schools I applied to, I really didn't know much about them. You sometimes you'll just copy paste an essay, change a couple words, right, and then do a little bit of research. But I think admissions officers can tell. Even when I look back and read some of my essays, I can tell oh wow, this school I really didn't have much feel towards. So I think if there is a school that you're particularly interested in attending, put in that research, put in that time, and really try to develop a very personalized why blank question or response. Yeah. Do you have a question? Yeah.
So then what drew you to this Brown?
Yeah, I'll get to that in a little bit. Yeah.
There are a lot of students reaching out with these contests in high school. Does it come up with examinations that allow the application?
I think, yeah, colleges want to see rigor, right, in your application. They want to see students who are pushing themselves and trying to take challenging courses and enhance their education, right? So I think you don't have to be crazy and take every single AP in the world, right? But taking at least a couple APs, it would be good. I think for me, junior, senior year, I think each semester I probably took around 2 to 3 APs. And I think generally, if people as you go through high school, that course will fall, because higher level courses are just AP classes. Does that answer your question? 6, 7. Yeah, I think that was about how many I took. So, yeah. And really, as I took AP courses, I tried to pick the ones that I would enjoy taking, right? So I didn't take AP Chem, didn't take AP Physics. I took things like AP US History, AP Statistics, AP Bio, classes that I thought were more fitting for me.
How did you choose the
Okay, yeah, I'll get into that in a bit. Yeah.
We all know that college is not to develop the next generation career.
Yeah.
But for students who are not born in this or who do not enjoy
Right.
in this, do you have any advice?
Sure, I think like a couple of my friends are very like, they're so smart, like they're incredibly smart, but they're just naturally not, I think, as inclined as a people person, right? And I think that's totally okay. Colleges understand that and they want to, like not everyone has to be like the president of their school, right? So I think, but what's important is that you still have to, I think, strive towards positions in your organization. For example, like if your student was in like a math club, right? Which maybe isn't as like people oriented, I think still getting positions in a math club would be something very good, right? What else? I don't know if that really answers your question. Answered? Okay, cool. Yeah. Sure, so I swam most of middle school. I swam on PASA, which is a competitive swimming team. I also was on varsity freshman year. So I think swimming for me was a pretty big part of my life, but freshman year, it was just a lot. At least at Pali, we had like morning practice, afternoon practice, and you had to go to meets on the weekends, right? And for me, like I felt like I was pretty good, but like I don't think I would have been able to put in the time to become like very, very good at swimming. I think that was just a decision I made sophomore year. Like, would I rather continue swimming, or would I maybe want to like look into like things like debate or like more leadership-oriented things? And for me, I felt that doing the other things were more helpful. But I do know people who are like continued with swimming, and I think like if you felt like it was something that you wanted to continue doing, showing that you've done a sport for what, how many years throughout high school is also something that's impressive to colleges. But I do know that it can take up a lot of time, so you have to be sort of smart about balancing swimming with your workload and then maybe with like an extracurricular. But I do think it's like if you really want to do it, I do think it's valuable. Yeah. Yeah, so I applied to Columbia early decision, did not get in, so then I did regular decision for the other schools. Yeah, regular. Brown does not have early action. Early action, I applied to U Chicago. Yeah, sure. So for at least the schools I was really interested in, or the schools that I were interested in but had questions about, my mom took me on a campus tour, I think, somewhere around sophomore year, which I thought was pretty helpful. Again, like, when I was writing my essays, I think there was a noticeable difference between the schools I had been to and the schools that I had never been to. You can just get a lot more like, personal connection with them. So I'd recommend, like, if you can, to check out some schools. But I do know also people who have gone to college campuses after they've gotten in, which is another option. I prefer going before. Yes?
Can you talk about the balance between listen to your parents' advice versus independence?
Okay. Yeah, sure.
And whether it is, can you talk about individual?
Sure, of course. So I think this is something that's like most families have to deal with. Even for me, I found that like my mom gives great advice, but for some reason, if she says it, I just like tend to not listen to it as much. I think it's like, I don't know what it is, it's something within that relationship, but as I was going through my college application process, she did have a lot of good feedback. Sometimes we would argue, I think like, you probably will, it's inevitable, but I think as a parent, it's important to give your child some space to like write their application, but also like make sure that they are, like that the feedback you're giving to is being listened to, because I know a lot of the times what my mom would say was like very right. So I think if you're the parent, it's important to give your student some space, but if you're the student, you also need to listen to what your parents say, because a lot of the times they will have good advice. And I think if your student, or if you like are not inclined to listen to your parents, still try to get help from other sources, right? You're like a counselor or an older peer. Yeah, and then sorry, your second question was interview process, right? Okay, so for Most of my schools, or I think probably half of my schools, I had an interview for that, and it's pretty straightforward. They'll just the interviewer will contact you. You'll set up a time. Usually, you'll meet up at a coffee shop or something, and talk for maybe 30 minutes to an hour. Generally, the questions they ask are pretty straightforward. It's just hey, what did you do in high school? What are you interested in? What do you want to study? And then they always ask, why do you want to apply to blank school, right? So make sure you're prepared to answer that. I think some of the things that I found were helpful were I came up with a list of interview questions that I found online and also that I would anticipate them asking, and then I just run through those questions to make sure that I'd have a pretty solid answer for any of those things that they would ask. Other things, also they always ask you do you have any questions for me? Make sure you have at least a couple questions that you can ask them, right? And then I think you just want to go into interview feeling confident is more important than totally prepping out, because you don't want to sound like a robot, but you also don't want to say nothing, right? So preparing, but not over preparing, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Back to campus tour. So what do you like when you visit to university? What are the things you love?
Sure, I'll touch on that in a little bit. Yeah.
So for major selections, each school will pick less popular majors and second school will pick the most popular.
I kind of think. At least for me, when I applied to most schools, I was economics, which I think is a fairly popular major. I think maybe there is some strategy with that. I wouldn't be the person to, maybe Sherry would know more about it. But I also think you can't just choose English as your major for no reason, right? A lot of schools will also ask you why are you choosing to study whatever you're saying you want to study, right? And I think you need to have some a solid answer for that essay, right? So maybe there is some slight strategy to that. But yeah, I think you have to be careful about it, because if you choose something totally that no one is going to if you take, I don't know, Chinese studies, right, as your major, and then your essay is just I am Chinese, so I want to do this, right? The colleges can see through it. But yeah, I'm not probably the best person to ask for that, sorry. Yeah.
You spend lots of time in swimming, then you make a decision to switch to other activities.
Right.
Actually, it's very, very difficult, I think, decision. How do you make this kind of, changes, with the help from counselor, or just everything, or from your parents, or just yourself?
I think it was mainly myself, because I've done swimming for a while, but I felt it was never something that I was I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m. and jump in the pool and do a bunch of laps. It was never something that I was super, super passionate about, versus other things I could tell that if I had to wake up at 5 a.m. to go to a tournament, I would be willing to do that, right? So I think signs like that can sort of tell you, or you as a parent, sort of which way sorry, let me start again. Once you sort of develop the sense of which activity you like more, I think switching isn't. Sorry, let me start again. So I think for me it was as I started enjoying my new activities more, I realized that I was willing to put in a lot more time, a lot more effort, and I felt a lot more excited about doing the other things than if I had continued swimming. And if I had done both, it just wouldn't have been able to do either well, right? So I think it was tough to let go of swimming, but I think for me, knowing that there was something else that I wanted to enjoy, that I was going to do instead of swimming, that I enjoyed more, and I could see myself doing for a longer time, made the switching easier. I think my mom was pretty supportive of when I stopped swimming and pursued other things. So I think if your student, your child, really does feel strongly about doing a certain activity or studying a certain thing, I would encourage you to help them explore that, because at least in my high school experience, I found that doing what I enjoyed was a lot better than sticking with something that I didn't really like doing. Yeah. Sure. So I can kind of speak to that. So I worked with Sherry on my college application, sort of, I think, maybe starting junior year, around then. And I think having a counselor can be helpful to sort of to give those like insights on your application, right? I think a lot of times when you're applying, there's some things that you just like totally don't know, right? Like what maybe a certain school doesn't like your school, or a certain college prefers like a candidate that looks like that. Just like information that you wouldn't necessarily know, and because like people who are in this field have read a lot of applications, they tend to have some sort of insight. I think can be helpful, but I do think largely with the college application, most of it is going to fall on like you yourself to do the work, right? Like they're not writing the essays for you. You're writing the essay yourself. The activities that you're doing generally should be things that you have pursued yourself. I think where the counselors can be very helpful is sort of coming in towards the end and like refining your application and then making it as strong as possible. Yeah. Yeah.
So you change from swimming to debate, is it because you already spent a lot of time previously doing debate already, or you start debate?
Yeah, so, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, so I started debate, I did middle school debate, so it was not my like first foray into debating. I think I also realized that like I probably wasn't going to be like the best swimmer regardless of like how much time or effort I wanted to put into it. So then I think making that switch seemed pretty straightforward to me. Just like after the season ended, I didn't feel like a super strong urge to sign up again.
So do you think debate helps you to get into the college you want or the major you want?
I think, again, like, not necessarily, I think, okay, so I think debate helped me with a couple things. I think more so on just developing as a person, like being able to talk in front of an audience, being able to debate with other people, right? And then also, since I was a coach for our team, working and teaching with younger students, I think learning those skills were very helpful. And then in terms of college, I think whatever sort of activity you do, if it doesn't necessarily have to be debate, will be helpful, especially if you are like have some sort of position, have some sort of like role on the team, right? So yeah, I think being like a coach on the debate team was helpful for my application process, but I think like if you were like a coach for some other thing, maybe like theater or art, it would also be very helpful. Yeah.
Compared with other Ivy League schools, what's the unique of the students Brown is looking for?
Yeah, I'll touch on that.
What type of a student will fit to Brown? Another question: how difficult to change major in Brown?
Okay, so I'll touch on the like what type of student fits school in a bit. At least for Brown, because we don't have any general education requirements, it's actually very easy to switch majors and concentrations is what we call them. So that was one of the things that I really liked about Brown, is because they give you so much freedom to sort of pursue your own education and take the courses that you want. So for example, for me right now, generally I take 4 classes per semester, and I think probably like 3 of them are classes that are related in some way to my majors, but then I usually have a 4th class that I can sort of just take something that I'm interested in doing, right? So for example, last semester I took Intro to Public Policy, the semester before that I took Social Entrepreneurship, classes that I found maybe if I was at a different school where I had a lot of requirements that I wouldn't necessarily be able to fit in. So that's something I like about Brown's open curriculum. Cool. Okay, so I'll sort of now move into the more college piece. The first question is, what do I do in college? So I think I was lucky in high school. I sort of figured out some of the things that I really enjoyed doing. So moving on to college, I kind of continued doing the things that I discovered I liked in high school. So at Brown, I'm involved in the student government. I am a peer advisor for incoming freshmen at Brown, and I'm also involved in some of the environmental clubs on campus. Someone asked me, what's the best quality skill for college learning from high school? I think one of the skills is very important to me, and I think helped me at least transition to my first year of college, was those time management skills. In college, there's a lot more free time because you're taking less classes, right? And school is shorter generally. like I'll have some days I'll have one class for 1 hour, right? And then you have the rest of the day to do like whatever. And I think it can be very easy to get lost in that time if you don't plan it well. So you also have to do things like at college, in addition to just studying, you also have to do more like household chores. Right? You have to do you have to do your laundry now. You have to figure out when you're getting food. You have to do a lot of studying. You have to like buy groceries. You have to buy supplies for your room, right? So there's a lot of things on top of just learning. There's also extracurriculars, and I think if you don't plan it well, the transition can be harder. So I think developing time management skills early on, especially during high school, can be very helpful transitioning into college. What kind of students does Brown like most? So I think Brown, like many other colleges, searches for students who are showing that they're very driven in what they do academically and also like outside of class, right? I kind of talked about that earlier. But I think especially at Brown, the type of student that we like are people who are very intelligent, very smart, but at the same time very compassionate. One thing I really liked about Brown when I visited was that it felt very welcoming, very like sort of a warm campus, very friendly atmosphere. We have the reputation for being the happiest of the Ivy Leagues, which I think to some extent is true. One thing I really like about the campus is that it never feels like ultra competitive. It feels very collaborative in that sense, and I think that sort of environment works well for me. So I think if you're interested in applying to Brown, we can talk to you later, but generally they're looking, like many colleges, for someone who's very driven, very intelligent, very, motivated, but they're also looking for someone who cares about the people in the world around them. Okay, what do you like most about Brown? How did you choose a university? How did I choose Brown? So I kind of talked about the open curriculum, which is something that I really value. The warm atmosphere. I also really like the location of Brown. Going in, I think, choosing from UChicago, Dartmouth, and Brown as my schools. Academically, most of them, I think they were all like strong enough for me. So it really came down to which school I felt I would fit in the most when I visited. And this is like, these are all great schools. This is just my personal opinion on the schools after I visited them. I found Dartmouth was kind of small, and Chicago seemed to have a lot of emphasis on academic rigor, which I think can be great for some students, but for me, as someone who's not like super academically strong, I felt like being in a more, not laid back, but relaxed environment where I could learn would fit me better. And then I also really liked the surrounding city of Providence and Rhode Island, so that's what drew me to Brown. Other questions? How is the workload as a double major? So I think for me, my experience in college has been the workload is definitely harder than in high school. Even though you have less classes, I think I spend more time studying now than I was in high school. And I think that's partially due to the fact that you're in a space where you have some of the top students from around the world coming and studying together, right? So naturally, it's going to be like the people around you are smarter, and that makes the classes harder, right? But I don't think the transition was overwhelming for me. I know a lot of the schools in the Bay Area, like Palo Alto High School, is pretty rigorous, which I think prepared me well. As a double major, I wouldn't say there's like a ton of extra work, because regardless of had I done 2 majors or if I'd done 1, I still would have been taking 4 classes this semester, right? So I don't think there's too much extra. For me, computer science takes a lot of time. So I think that has been something that's surprising to me. For me, computer science I think takes more time than my other classes combined. And that's sort of just the nature of some majors. I know like for people studying to become, like want to go to med school, bio can also take a lot of time. So depending on which 2 majors you want to put together, that can dramatically increase or decrease the amount of time you spend working. But I do think it's like fairly rewarding to be able to graduate with two areas of study. And then the last thing was, how did you decide on your major / what I wanted to study? So I think for me, it was more of not deciding what I want to do, but what I don't want to do. So as I was going through high school, I realized like, hey, I don't want to do math, I don't want to do science, I don't want to become a doctor, don't want to like do physics. So like, what's sort of left? What do I like, right? And as I was doing more like leadership-oriented things, I discovered that I was really interested in learning more about business and how to run a business, how to manage business. And I also was enjoying sort of the economics courses that I had in high school, and that drove me towards economics. What I like about it is that it's a very broad topic in the sense that it's applicable to many different fields, right? So if I want to do business in the future, economics is a good foundation to sort of develop these principles. But if I don't want to do business, I also have the opportunity to apply that economics degree in other areas of study. And then with computer science, I think it's just a really useful tool to understand, especially in this day and age. So that's how I ended up on Econ CS as my majors. Cool. All right, so I think those are the questions that I got from Sherry. If people have more questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Yeah.
I'm wondering how many hours is there to study, and how many hours is there socializing?
I think it kind of depends on the day of the week. I think Monday through like Thursday, it's generally like after you finish classes, you study for the rest of the day, at least for me. But then within that time, there are social times, right? Like your classes, you generally have friends. And then one thing at college that's been kind of different is that your meals become very social too, right? Because you generally eat your lunch, your dinner, you eat breakfast with a group of friends, so that becomes sort of a social part. Yeah, so I think generally it'd be like for Monday through Thursday, it'd be mainly either studying or like doing clubs. And then Friday, Saturday, Sunday are the times where I have more, maybe like I'll study for a third to half the day, and then use the rest of the time to like hang out with friends.
So is it like 60 hours work and treat?
Probably not, probably a little less than 60, but it can vary depending on. Yeah.
How do you deal with peer pressure and competition?
Okay, so I think in high school I definitely felt it more than in college. I think a lot of it was because like people are trying to apply to colleges, right? And with that peer pressure, I think feel a lot of pressure to be like some of my friends who are like geniuses at math and science. And I think for like freshman year, I was like following that path, right? Like doing a lot of math competitions, doing science bowl. But I realized that like one, I wasn't really good at it, and I think partially was because I really just wasn't that interested in it, right? And from there, I drifted towards doing the other stuff, which I felt a lot strongly connected with. And from there, I was able to put in my effort, like put in a lot more, invest a lot more energy into doing those things. And I think by doing that, I sort of stood out from some of my peers maybe. So my advice would be like, don't be pressured into doing something just because your friends are doing it. But I do think like a bit of peer pressure is nice because it like kind of pushes you to continue trying and working hard. Yeah, so I worked, I think junior, senior year, Sherry actually helped me find an internship at a local gaming startup. So I did marketing and a tiny bit of like outreach for them. So that was nice to get some work experience. It was also paid eventually. So I'd recommend that if you are interested in looking for some sort of internship or job, to try to reach out to maybe some of your family contacts, your friends' contacts, or someone who's like maybe connected, like Sherry, and look for a job. I think on the college application there is a space for like, have you ever worked in a job before? So if you want to put something there, I think it could help. Yeah. Okay, so I think usually during my freshman and sophomore summer, our debate club hosted a summer camp for students in the area. So I was a coach there. I taught for a couple weeks. And then junior year, I went to, I did a summer camp at Cornell. It was business related. I don't, like, I think it was good to sort of experience college at that camp and life away from home, but I don't necessarily know how much that was helpful for my application. I think what's important in the summer is just make sure you're doing something, not like something meaningful, because I think it can be very easy to just sort of sit at home and do nothing. Yeah. Yeah.
So the first one is you said when you did it blind, you feel it's more like friendly, relaxed, which choose blind.
Yeah.
So what did they do? Did you go on a tour or did somebody come to you?
Sure. So I think when I visited colleges, I tried to do a couple things. One is go on the campus tour. Two, if I had any friends who went to that school, talk with them. And I think for me, it was just like walking around the campus. I could already tell sort of what the vibe was. You want to, I think, generally visit campuses when there are students there, because it's more of an accurate depiction. I also just really like, I think the campus is really pretty, which is something that's important to me, being in a place that because like college is not just where you go to study, it's also where you live, right? So I want to be somewhere where I think is very nice. And yeah, so college tour, I met with a couple friends, and then I also just did a lot of research online. What was the second part?
The second
Yeah.
question is, did you visit tutors when you were in high school? And are you becoming tutors at college?
Sure. So in high school.
Obtaining like doing the classes on your own versus yourself.
Okay, so in college right now, I don't have any tutors. I think one thing I've noticed is that I'm a lot more motivated to study now that I'm in college, which I think is good. So that's been going well. In high school, I had a tutor for math when I skipped a grade in math. And then I sort of struggled sophomore year with my analysis course, and then at the end I decided to like stay back a year. So that was like normal math. So I did have a tutor for math. I think he was helpful in some extent, but a lot of it, I think a lot of it just has to do with the student. Like a tutor can only help so much. So I don't know. I think it also depends a lot on who your tutor is. If you get someone who's not as good, it can, I think, sometimes be even like hurtful. But like in my experience, I think for that math course, that tutor was pretty helpful.
What would you recommend for students who are like looking to develop their leadership skills but really don't have any in this end?
Okay, I think like most people have leadership skills. It's just a matter of fact, like whether or not you want to apply them, right? I think sort of how I developed my leadership skills, where I just in the clubs that I was a part of, I think you naturally just as you like spend more time in them, leadership opportunities become available. What's important is just like when they become available, you like apply for them, right? Let's see. And I think sort of leadership can come as you put in, like if you're really involved in the club, people will start noticing that you're taking on more responsibility, and that can help you, I think, develop some leadership skills. And then if you want to choose to run for like a position in your club, being able to already have that experience, being very involved in your club can help you get that position. Yeah. Yes.
How many high school and states
Okay, yeah. So I applied to most of the UCs, I think. Like when you apply to the UCs, they just give you like a checkbox. You can like check off which ones you want to apply to. So I think I did most of them, and I think I got into all the UCs. And then outside of state schools, maybe I applied to around 10. Yeah, and I probably got to like half of them. Sorry, what was the second part? And the UCs? Right, okay, so I think the UCs are really great schools, especially since we're in California, right? it's financially also more attractive than out-of-state university, which may be more expensive. I think for me, like when I was deciding between Berkeley and some of the out-of-state schools, one part of it was that I kind of wanted to experience life away from home, right? Berkeley is very close, which I think can be very beneficial. Like some of my friends who go to Berkeley can go home every couple weeks. Like I can't do that, right? But I really did like going away from home. I think it allowed me to develop more as an individual and like get some of the skills, adult skills that I need. And then in terms of, I think, like one of the things I like about Brown versus Berkeley is that there are less people on campus, right? So I feel like it's a bit more, I think there's more attention placed on you and there are more sort of resources available because it is private school. Yeah, Brett.
While you were at Palo Alto High, which classes did you take? Like, did you focus more on staffing or academics?
Sure, so I think, I don't remember every class I took, but I think I tended to, like with the advanced course, I tended to do more classes related towards humanities / history side versus STEM side. So I took AP US History, AP Statistics, what else? AP Chinese, AP Literature. I also took like honors English, and I didn't take classes like AP Chem, AP Physics. And then, what else? Yeah, so I think with my AP course, I tried to take classes that I felt like I would be more interested in doing. Yeah. Sure.
All
Yeah.
5 on AP.
Sorry, go ahead.
You got all 5, score 5 on
I think I scored either 4 or 5 on my APs, yeah. And I think that's generally the range you want to be following. 5 obviously is better than 4, but 4 I think is pretty good too. Yeah. Yeah.
How do you feel about housing at Brown? Housing is really
At Brown specifically? So I actually really liked the housing at Brown. The rooms most are doubles, and I felt like they were pretty spacious. We also have like a kitchen. Every building has a kitchen, and it's very like, at least where I lived, it was a hallway format. So there'd be, I don't know, maybe like 15 rooms in one hallway and another 15 there. I thought living in a dorm was fine, and were you concerned about the number of people, like having a lot of people in a dorm? Oh yeah, so I felt pretty good about it. The rooms were pretty spacious, and at least the freshman dorms were very, like they're pretty new and very central campus-wise. So, no complaints.
Sorry, fall back to the AP questions.
Yeah.
So, because I know the school district you're coming from, they pretty limited for your 9th and 10th grade.
Right.
So, the total you take probably like 6, 7.
Yeah.
So, for the Bay Area, some of the students they allow from 9th grade. So, do you feel less competition when you take less class when you apply for college? Especially like, I think for UC and Auto State.
So I feel like less competitive?
Yes.
Okay, so I think one thing I learned as I was applying to colleges is that when the colleges like recruit or admit people, they compare you to people mainly in your own school. So the colleges will know that, for example, my district doesn't allow you to take AP's 9th, 10th grade, whereas another district would, right? So I wouldn't be too concerned about like being uncompetitive compared to other school districts because I'll mainly be looking at people in your district. So you want to just be like fairly competitive compared to the people around you versus everyone in the Bay Area. Yeah.
So did you apply to Brown as a double major, or did you choose the major later?
So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm wondering because it seems like you took a lot of humanities classes, so you're majoring in computer science. So
Right.
usually,
Yeah.
it's very hard to get into the computer science without the
For
standard
sure.
courses.
So again, this is I guess kind of Brown specific, but we have an economics degree, and we also have a combined computer science economics degree. So I think when I applied just straight economics, and then because it's so flexible, at Brown I was able to like add on computer science, and they're like both very popular like majors, so it wasn't too much of an issue. But I do know that at some like UCs it is a little harder to switch, especially if you want to switch into computer science. So if you want to go in computer science, you should focus on computer science, because you may not be able to switch into it if you go into something else. Yeah.
How bad is the weather?
Oh, on the East Coast? Okay. Actually, I thought this winter was pretty not bad at all. I've gone skiing a couple times, right? And I think it was just like a little worse. We had a couple, like I think 2 snow days. But you just, as long as you have a nice hat, some boots, jacket, it was pretty fine. But I did hear that it was an easy winter, so we'll see how it goes. But I did enjoy having snow, right? Pretty fun.
I have just a question about the classroom AP. So in your junior and senior year, how many AP classes do you have each semester?
I think it was either 2 or 3. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like per semester.
Per semester.
Yeah.
College also, this college,
Which colleges I didn't get an interview, but they still accepted me? I think I didn't get any interviews for the UCs. No interviews for the UCs. I think that's because they have so many people, right? They can't interview everyone. And a lot of times, with the college interviews, they say it's like random, right? So then some people just won't get interviews. Let's see which colleges interviewed me. I didn't get it. I think UChicago, I didn't get an interview for that. I think most of the schools I didn't get an interview. I think I would try harder in some of my math classes. But overall, I think I have a pretty positive experience in my high school. I know it's not the same for everyone, but yeah, I think overall I had a pretty good experience. Yeah. Yes.
It's like, there's kind of all kinds of
I think you should focus on the subjects you really like, but then maybe take a couple, like 1 or 2, not 1 or 2, but like 2 or 3 courses that are a little bit different, just to show that you have like the ability to stretch outside. But I think it is good to show focus.
Did you apply to any liberal arts colleges?
I applied to how it's called. Yeah. Supposed to have an S. Swarthmore, yeah. Swarthmore. I did not get into Swarthmore. I think mainly I applied to UCs and then larger private schools. And that's because I don't think I knew a lot about the smaller liberal arts colleges. But I do know a couple of people who go to like Swarthmore and then smaller colleges, and it seems like they're having fun there. So I think like if you go visit the school, and if you've done some research on the school and you think that you would enjoy going there, like many of the liberal arts schools are very, very, very good. So yeah, I think if you're interested, definitely apply. Yeah, yes.
How many years do you involve the student body and the speech and debate club?
Sure. So speech and debate, I started summer of 8th grade in middle school, and then did it, I think, very heavily focused freshman and sophomore year, and then not as much junior, senior year, but it's definitely still like involved. And then part of the reason why is because I picked up student government junior, senior year, so 2 years. I started doing student government junior year and senior year.
Oh.
Yeah.
So because this tool is, both is time consuming, so you
Right,
won't
right.
be able to manage it.
Right, and I do think that as I was more involved in student government, I did a little less in debate.
Can you recommend any method to boost your speech and debate skills?
Sorry, what methods?
Yeah, how you improve through which method to get it?
Sure. So I think with speech and debate specifically, a lot of it is preparation and practice. The type of debate I did, it was like you had to debate one person, right? It's just you and another person and the judge in the room. So what some of our ace debaters would do is they would write down the topic that we're debating, write down their arguments, write down any possible arguments they think their opponent could come up with, and then come up with responses to that, and then come up with the opponent's responses to their responses, and then they would come up with more responses to their opponent's responses. So it'd be very planned out, and usually there wouldn't be any surprises. With debate, that was one part, the preparation and research, making sure you have the best evidence, and making sure that you would be prepared to answer sort of any attacks on your arguments that the opponent gave to you. And I think the other component of that was practicing the talking piece, right? So with my speech and debate team, we would have practice twice a week after school, and going to those practices, we did a lot of speaking drills, and then sort of impromptu responses and practices, so that we would be prepared when the competition came.
Did you go to outside camp to help you for?
Not for debate. I think the program we had at my high school was pretty comprehensive and really good, so there wasn't a need to do it. I study a lot. I think, for me, I'm not someone who's very good at taking tests. I think my sophomore summer, I just spent studying for the SAT. So, yeah, a lot of practice. Yeah, I went to one camp, I think, at Elite. Yeah, that's something. Yeah.
So you didn't have any student government experience at PhD?
Yeah, so I did not have any student government experience. No, I ran for student government in 6th grade at middle school. Did not win that, and then from there I just didn't do it anymore. But I think I always had a desire to do it. And I think, I may not necessarily have had a student government specific experience, but through the clubs I was doing freshman and sophomore year, I had the leadership experience that I needed when I ran for student government. Yeah. Questions? Yeah.
What is student government?
What is student government? At most schools you have sort of a body of students that are either elected or maybe some are selected by the student activities office or whatever, and they generally plan events for dances, activities for students. They'll also maybe venture into a little bit of policy regarding the district. I know we voted on sometimes how much we wanted to charge for parking, things like that. I'd say that if you or if you're a student or you are interested in student government, give it a go. I really had I learned a lot and had a lot of fun doing it. Yeah. Yes.
Do you have any scholarships?
Sure. So I think most colleges will have a financial aid calculator on their website that you can fill out, and then depending on what your finances are, they'll give you an estimate for how much they can give you. For me, I think because it was private school, there really wasn't much in terms of financial support, and I think that's kind of one of the pluses of the UCs, right? They're a lot more affordable. Let's see, and I think, but there are some merit-based scholarships that you can look into. I know National Merit, some schools will accept that. And then I know a couple of friends who weren't eligible for school financial aid, so they did a couple of essay contests and won maybe a couple $100 there. Not a lot, but I think if you really look, there are scholarships out there, but that also requires a lot of time. Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about the difference before high school and after compared to high school?
Let's let's see, I think in middle school, I don't remember a ton about it, but I think I was always like a pretty good student in school throughout, and sort of just having that mindset of like how to study and how to do well, I think transitioned into high school and made that easier for me. Yeah, but I think like middle school can be helpful, but it's not like if you don't do something in middle school, it's going to affect your college admission process, right? So I think like during that transition year, just trying to keep your grades up, but also, as I was saying earlier, try to open your palette of experiences and try different activities to support. Yes?
Did you find Brown's financial aid calculators accurate?
For me, it was pretty accurate. I think generally they'll probably be like in the ballpark, right? I do know that if you think that there should be some reason why you have a discrepancy, you can email the financial aid office and they'll give you maybe a more accurate estimate. Yeah. Yes.
Consider working in college?
Sure. So I do know people who like work either for dining, work for the library, work under a professor. I think for me, because I do a couple other activities outside of class, working wouldn't be feasible just within my schedule. But if you choose to make work sort of like at one of your activities, it can be very manageable. And the plus there's like you get like resources, and like people who work in dining get free food, which is always good, right? Yes.
When you choose the college for the class, did you worry about designing your system of interview? So you worry about this college strong.
Yeah, for sure. So generally I wanted to apply to schools that like had good economics departments, right? I think like at a certain point, like once a school, or how do I say this? It was like generally I was looking for a school that would have, like has economics department that's maybe not the best, but like very solid, right? I think. Sorry, can you say your question again?
Yes,
Yeah.
Do you have any tool on how to make each school strong?
Strong, okay. I think sometimes it's hard to measure, especially like after you pass a certain threshold of like, these schools are very good, and then like how do you tell which one's like slightly better? I think some of that comes off of like anecdote, right? When you're talking with people who are in the field. So for example, some of my cousins, they work in economics, and they were able to say like, oh, like I know this school has a good reputation. Another tool that you can use to maybe figure out which school has the better department is you can like go on LinkedIn and then type in the school and then type in the job you're interested in, and then it'll show you how many people from a certain school are doing X job, right? So then from there you can say like, oh, how many people are executives at like this investing company, right? From blank school, and you can kind of see there. But generally, I think for me, like once I knew the department was good enough, it wasn't as important as maybe the atmosphere of the school. Yes. We are good at bio. We have a lot of a really good medical program, and then I think we also are good at CS. Those are like our standout, I think, departments. But then because it is like an Ivy League school, those departments, even though they may not necessarily be our specialties, I think are still pretty strong, which is nice. Yes. Yeah. So. Yeah, I think it would be harder because there are more competitive like students. There are more competitive students applying to that program because it's more like renowned, I guess. Well, yeah, I think at Brown it's very easy to do that, to switch, but then like the issue is you have to get in first, right? So if you apply as mythology, you better have a good reason why you're applying as mythology, right, or something like that. But once you get in, like one thing that's really nice about Brown is that there is a lot of flexibility to switch. Yes? At Brown? I think think very little. The Greek life on campus is not as prevalent as some other schools. It still exists, which is nice if you want it, but I don't know the exact percentage, but it really isn't. I would say like you don't notice it too much. Yes.
How helpful is Brown's alumni network?
Okay, so I think it kind of varies. So we have this program that you can use to search up alumni and the field of work they're doing. So when I was looking for internships for the summer, I used that, connected with a couple, and they were like very gracious in helping me sort of like paint their recruiters. I think, but I've also like I think it's kind of like hit or miss. Especially since I think more of our alumni are concentrated on the East Coast, right, versus the West Coast. So there weren't as many resources on the West Coast. But I think like people are there. You just have to put in the work to reach out to them. Yeah. Yes.
You mentioned that Brown is easy to switch. So you know that after you see the ID, the general of the true that is very hard.
Yeah, I think it is that the sentiment is true because UCs have like more people and more rigid like guidelines.
All IDs are similar and easy.
I think Brown is probably the easiest because of our open curriculum, but I imagine that the IBs would be it'd be more possible to switch than at UC. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I think they did both. They have a section for you put in every class you're taking, you put in the letter grade, and then at the end they ask you for your GPA. Yeah. Yeah. Not each year what your GPA was, but they at least when I applied, they asked you the grade for every class you took each year. And you also have to send them your transcript too. I think there was like a kind of like a dip, and then like that. Yeah. Yeah.
What subject
I took bio SAT, Chinese SAT, math SAT. What else? I don't remember. I think there may have been like one more. But yeah, I generally took like I took bio SAT after I took AP bio. I took math after I finished calculus. I don't know. I had a sophomore year after I finished analysis. And I took Chinese while I was taking Chinese. So I kind of like aligned them with the other tests I was taking, which I thought was nice, but I didn't have to study twice. Sure. So we definitely like every school have international students. I think I know like other schools may have a lot more. Like Columbia, I know has a lot of international students. I think at least in my experience, it's very I think it's a good healthy amount. Yeah. I actually don't think they're that different. Maybe I think partially it's because I'm Chinese myself, right? Like I understand Chinese, and I'm more familiar with the culture. So like to me, it's not that big of a shift, maybe as compared to like people who aren't. Yeah. I applied to, I don't remember the full list. I applied to USC. I applied to Columbia. I applied to Brown. I applied to Cornell. I applied to Dartmouth, which is one of the Pomona colleges. and then applied to UCs. Yes.
Major I don't like.
Economics.
Which school do you say away and
Yeah, I think for every school I was economics.
did you take the computer class in high school?
Yeah, so I took Intro to Java, Advanced Java, and AP Java. Absolutely hated it. I think partially that was because of the teacher. I really didn't jive well with him. I didn't even take the AP test after I took the course. But sort of going in freshman year of college, I wanted to give it another shot with a different teacher, and it's actually been like relatively pretty enjoyable for me. So yeah, that's yeah. 2 more questions, and then yeah.
So, what age did you start taking those programming classes?
I took them sophomore and junior year.
Sophomore.
So I did Intro Java first semester sophomore year, Advanced Java second semester sophomore year, and then I took AP Java first semester junior year. Yeah. Sorry, what? Oh, the journalism? Pali has a really good journalism department. It's actually the classes, the journalism sort of curriculum are classes you can take at Pali. So I was part of one of our publications that was the online publication. So what I did was, I think, sophomore year, I took beginning journalism, and then junior, senior year, I took this class called web journalism. And basically we'd work on writing stories. I was also the business manager for our publication, so I would sell ads for them. And I thought it was a pretty good experience.
What's the name of the
It's called the Pali Voice. Yeah.
So as you also taking that Pali Voice, in the future, this kind of activity, how it help you in the college? Is it very helpful or in the long term?
In the long term, I think what was cool about journalism, it was student run, right? So our publication was entirely run by like our editors-in-chief were students. Mainly the teacher acted as an advisor to them, and he would edit our stories. So it was it almost felt like a mini business, right? Where some people are getting money, some people are doing the writing, and then you have to like get out to the students, right? So I think it was a really good, like more hands-on, real-world experience versus some of the other academic classes, which are very like more abstract in a sense. So yeah, I think if you go to Pali or a school with a cool journalism department and you are interested in writing or like selling ads, it can be a really cool experience. Awesome. So I think that's it. If you have any more questions, I'll hang out for a couple minutes after. But thanks for coming.
You think you get benefit from the talk? Welcome to donate whatever, $10, $20, $1, $2, okay, to cover the rent fee. They active $20. Already had $20 donation. And then please help to clean up keep the black chairs here, the white chairs, everything white, yeah, to that room. Thank you very much.